There is a place in Japan, beneath the earth, hidden from view and invisible to the untrained eye, a structure that has been forgotten by modern society, a dwelling that once housed warriors, a shelter that protected people through harsh winters and dangerous times, a space engineered with precision, a room designed for survival. This was the Samurai Doma, and we have completely lost the knowledge of how to build it. The word Doma itself is telling. It refers to an underground space, a chamber beneath the surface, a refuge deliberately concealed, a sanctuary that offered protection, a shelter strategically positioned. The samurai understood something fundamental about survival, that sometimes the best defense is invisibility, that sometimes the safest place is below ground, that sometimes the most secure location is hidden from sight. But what exactly was a Samurai Doma? How was it constructed? What made it effective? Why did the samurai choose to build underground shelters? What advantages did these structures provide? And most importantly, why have we forgotten how to build them? These are the questions we are going to answer today. These are the mysteries we are going to uncover. These are the secrets that have been lost to time. Let me take you back to medieval Japan. Picture a time of constant conflict. Picture an era of warfare and uncertainty. Picture a period when warriors needed places to hide, places to store supplies, places to survive siege conditions, places where they could retreat when threatened. The samurai understood that above ground structures were vulnerable. They understood that buildings could be burned. They understood that dwellings could be destroyed. They understood that they needed alternatives. The Samurai Doma was that alternative. It was a structure that was partially or completely underground. It was a shelter that was built into the earth itself. It was a dwelling that used the earth's natural insulation. It was a refuge that was protected by layers of soil and rock. It was a space that was difficult to detect. It was a location that was difficult to attack. The construction of a Samurai Doma began with careful site selection. Locations were chosen for their natural drainage and to avoid flooding. Sites had to be positioned so water would flow away. The samurai understood that water was the enemy of underground structures, that moisture could cause collapse, and that dampness could make the space uninhabitable. They favored naturally dry ground, hillsides, and elevated areas where runoff would carry water away from the structure. The excavation process was labor-intensive. Workers dug into the earth and removed soil carefully to create a chamber beneath the surface. Depth was calculated to be deep enough to provide protection, but not so deep that water would accumulate. The dimensions were planned so the space was large enough to accommodate people, but not so large that it would be structurally unstable. Every measurement was deliberate, and every decision relied on experience and knowledge. The walls of the Doma were reinforced. The samurai did not simply dig a hole and live in it. They engineered the structure, using wooden supports and stone reinforcement to create a framework that prevented collapse. They understood structural engineering and load distribution, and how to create a space that would remain stable for years. The walls were often lined with stone, which prevented soil from crumbling and created a more permanent, more habitable structure. The roof of the Doma was crucial. It had to support the weight of the earth above it, be waterproof, and be strong enough to withstand pressure. The samurai used wooden beams and stone to create a roof that was both strong and durable. The roof was often covered with layers of material, including thatch, clay, and earth. These layers provided insulation and waterproofing, and they helped the structure blend into the landscape. The entrance to a doma was often hidden. It might be concealed beneath a building. It might be disguised as a storage area. It might be positioned in an unexpected location. The samurai understood that a hidden entrance provided security. It prevented enemies from discovering the shelter, and it prevented unauthorized access. The entrance was often small, which made it harder to detect, harder to attack, and easier to defend. The interior of a doma was organized for function. There were sleeping areas, storage areas, spaces for cooking, and areas for weapons. The layout was efficient. Every space served a purpose. The samurai understood that underground spaces were limited, so organization was essential. They knew that every square meter had to be utilized effectively. Ventilation was critical. An underground space without proper air circulation becomes uninhabitable. The samurai understood this, and they created ventilation systems. Air shafts were positioned to allow fresh air to enter, so smoke from fires could escape and stale air could be replaced. The ventilation was designed to be inconspicuous. Air shafts were often disguised. They might appear to be natural features or be hidden beneath vegetation. The samurai understood that ventilation could not compromise security. Lighting was another challenge. Underground spaces are dark. The samurai used fire for light with candles and oil lamps. They understood that fire provided both light and warmth, and that fire could be controlled. They made sure smoke from fires could be ventilated away. The positioning of light sources was strategic. It illuminated work areas, provided comfort, and maintained morale during long periods underground. Water management was essential. The samurai created systems to collect and store water. They dug wells and created cisterns. They understood that water was necessary for survival and that stored water was essential during siege conditions. Having water available meant they could survive longer. The water systems were integrated into the structure and formed part of the overall design. Storage was crucial. A doma had to contain supplies, food, weapons, ammunition, medicine, and tools. The samurai understood that survival depended on having adequate supplies. They created storage areas and organized supplies efficiently. They protected supplies from moisture and made sure items could be found quickly. Inventory management was essential. The temperature inside a doma was naturally regulated. Underground spaces maintain a relatively constant temperature because the earth provides insulation. It is cooler in summer and warmer in winter. The samurai understood that underground shelters provided natural climate control. This reduced the need for heating and cooling and made the space more comfortable and more economical. The construction of a doma required significant labor. It required excavation, reinforcement, finishing work, and the installation of systems. The samurai invested considerable resources in building these structures. This tells us something important. They believed these structures were worth the investment. They believed the benefits justified the effort. They believed underground shelters were essential to their survival strategy. The strategic advantages of a doma were significant. It provided protection from attack, concealment, shelter from weather, a secure location for supplies, and a refuge during siege conditions. It provided a place where warriors could rest and recover, where the wounded could be treated, and where families could be protected. The doma was not just a shelter, it was a strategic asset. The psychological impact of a doma was important. Warriors knew they had a refuge, a secure location, and that they could survive difficult circumstances. That confidence affected their performance, their willingness to engage in combat, and their strategic decisions. The existence of a doma meant warriors could take risks. They could venture into dangerous territory, and they could engage in bold actions because they knew they had a place to retreat. The maintenance of a doma was ongoing. The structure had to be inspected regularly, damage had to be repaired, moisture had to be managed, ventilation had to be maintained, and supplies had to be rotated. The samurai understood that a doma required care, and they knew that neglect would lead to deterioration. Regular maintenance extended the life of the structure, and samurai invested time and resources in maintaining their underground shelters. The knowledge required to build a doma was substantial. It required an understanding of geology, engineering, hydrology, and construction techniques. Samurai had specialists who knew how to build underground structures, engineers who could calculate the necessary dimensions, and workers who could execute the construction. This knowledge was valuable, closely guarded, and passed down through generations. The decline of the doma is a story of cultural change. As Japan became more peaceful, the need for underground shelters decreased, and warfare became less common. So the strategic value of a doma faded. As society modernized, the knowledge of how to build these structures was lost. Techniques were forgotten, principles abandoned, and younger generations did not learn these skills. Today, archaeologists still find and study doma structures across Japan. They have excavated and documented these shelters, but the knowledge of how to build them is gone. Those building methods have been lost and the guiding principles have been set aside. We can see and study the structures, but we cannot replicate or rebuild them, and we cannot apply that knowledge to modern problems. This is a tragedy. The principles that made doma structures effective are still relevant. Underground structures provide protection, insulation, security, and shelter. These benefits remain valuable in a world of climate change, extreme weather, and uncertainty. Underground structures could offer important advantages, but we have lost the knowledge of how to build them. Some researchers are working to recover that knowledge. They study ancient doma structures, document construction techniques, and analyze engineering principles. They seek to understand how the samurai built these spaces and to recover knowledge that was lost. Their work is important. Their research could help us build more effective shelters, and their discoveries could help apply ancient engineering to modern challenges. If you could see a samurai doma, if you could experience the space, if you could understand how it was constructed, you would appreciate the engineering skill of the samurai. You would see why they chose to build underground, and you would grasp the advantages that subterranean structures provided. You would understand why this knowledge deserves recovery and why scholars and builders should study these shelters. You would learn why we should learn from the past and how those lessons can still matter for how we design shelter today. The Samurai Doma represents more than just a shelter. It represents knowledge. It represents engineering skill. It represents strategic thinking. It represents the ability to solve problems. It represents the wisdom of ancient people. It represents a way of thinking that modern society has largely abandoned. It represents an approach to survival that differs from our modern approach. It represents a perspective that values self-sufficiency. It represents a philosophy that values preparation. The loss of this knowledge is significant. It means we have lost a tool. It means we have lost an option. It means we have lost a way of thinking about shelter and protection. It means we have lost a connection to our past. It means we have lost the ability to apply ancient wisdom to modern problems. The recovery of this knowledge is important. It could help us solve modern challenges. It could help us build better shelters. It could help us become more resilient. If you found this exploration of Samurai Doma structures fascinating, if you want to learn more about how ancient warriors solved practical problems, if you want to understand how underground shelters were engineered, if you want to discover the knowledge that has been lost, please hit that subscribe button right now. Because here at Shinro Way, we explore the knowledge that created powerful civilizations. We reveal the techniques that produced remarkable results. We uncover the wisdom that modern people have forgotten. We show you how to apply ancient knowledge to modern challenges. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand not just how these structures worked, but why they worked, if you want to explore the engineering principles behind a Samurai Doma construction, if you want to learn about other ancient shelter designs, check out our other videos. We have content on traditional Japanese architecture. We have content on underground construction techniques. We have content on how ancient engineers solved problems. We have content on how ancient knowledge applies to modern challenges. Each video reveals another layer of this remarkable tradition. Leave a comment below. Tell us what surprised you most about Samurai Doma structures. Tell us what you think about the contrast between ancient and modern shelter design. Tell us what ancient techniques you think we should rediscover. Tell us about your own experiences with alternative shelter designs. Tell us what questions you have about underground construction. Your comments help us understand what resonates with our audience. Your engagement helps us create better content. Your feedback shapes our future videos. And if you really want to support our mission to preserve and share ancient knowledge, consider becoming a channel member. Members get early access to new videos. Members get exclusive content. Members get behind-the-scenes looks at how we research these topics. Members become part of our community of people who are passionate about understanding history, engineering, and survival. Members help us continue this important work of preserving and sharing ancient wisdom. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being curious about how ancient people solved problems. Thank you for caring about understanding the wisdom of the past, because understanding the past helps us solve the problems of the present. And understanding Samurai Doma structures helps us understand that ancient people were sophisticated engineers, that they understood principles that are still relevant today, that they created solutions that we have forgotten, that their knowledge is worth recovering. Remember, the Samurai Doma was not a simple hole in the ground. It was an engineered structure. It was a sophisticated shelter. It was a strategic asset. It was built with knowledge and skill. It was maintained with care. It was valued by the samurai. And that's a lesson we can all learn from. In a world where we have lost touch with practical skills, in a world where we depend on modern technology, in a world where we have forgotten how to solve problems using natural materials and ancient knowledge, we need to remember that alternatives exist. That knowledge exists. That ancient people were sophisticated engineers, that their solutions are still relevant, that we can learn from the past, that we can recover lost knowledge, that we can build a better future by understanding where we came from.